sense. But let's zero into the more current price action. Now, I removed off most of the previous lines. I didn't take off anything that's above or below recent price action because those are still valid. And this chunk here, I talked about this on Friday, about 39.55 down to 39.53 as sort of like, if I was going to really consider getting bullish, I'd want to get above that because there's pretty strong support level there, multiple supports there. And that is actually sort of like the high of where we tapped into, during that sort of end of day overnight. I guess that was technically the overnight. We tapped into that almost. We stopped at this little high volume node that we had from this rotation. Okay, you can see that if I draw a profile, little high volume cluster right there. And that acted as our resistance. We fell back down. This level was actually drawn off of the daily chart, right? So this level had to do with, if you zoom in and you look at this volume cluster right here, this high volume cluster right here, it's a very steep sort of drop off. And that steep drop off lines up with where the market found resistance right here. So I, kind of took the best fit line, marked off that resistance. It was resistance here and then support here. So it lines up right with that low there. And then I drew my line across. I really like the confluence of high and low volume areas aligning with significant price action areas. And that became the low. Now, I wasn't trading at that point, and I certainly wouldn't have tried to catch that bottom, but I just think it's interesting to note. And then in the overnight, tonight, this is where we sort of pushed up and tested that strong support resistance area right there. That's where we found resistance at 39.55. Now, when I was chatting in the chat room, I was actually looking at this volume cluster here. I was just looking on my phone. I didn't open my computer last night, so I didn't really have in my mind that this level was up here. And I was talking about the potential for, us to watch these levels in here. So 39.40, I think, was the level I mentioned, but this volume is more accurate than my trading view volume. And 28 also is sort of like the highest volume in that cluster. But again, sort of knowing that this was up here, it's not like once we got above 39.40, I would have gotten super bullish because again, I have this on my chart. And again, this level comes from looking at this, this area. And there's this very low volume node and this kind of support and resistance that you can see here. And so that's why I had that marked off as sort of a zone or a channel. So basically everything above this swing, above and below, is from very previous price action. What I want to look at now this morning, preparing for the open, is sort of what happened in here, and then more significantly, what happened on the way up. I say what happened in here because this was cash session price action. So was a little bit of the way up here, but especially looking around here, this is all pre-market, and I don't give as much weight to that. But this was our cash session, sort of very aggressive move down. We can see where the volume was on this move down. And I like to see how price sort of interacted with that. This line here, 39.01, was marked off previously. It was the POC of this whole rotation here, this big congestion area. And I didn't clear this level off because it was a very significant level, from this congestion. So you can see it there, 39.0175. But also, it's the gap fill. It's the gap fill level, right? So just sort of coincidentally or not, it's the gap fill level that I want to be aware of too. So I kept that there. That's why it's a darker level, because it's based off of a huge rotation, and it's also a gap fill level, very significant level for me to keep my eye on. So, and you can see how we moved up through this stuff, right? We pushed up through this. We tested this volume cluster. We tested it right here. So I'm going to sort of watch that. But what I really want to see right now is I want to grab the accumulation at the bottom. So I'm starting my profile about there where this range starts. all the way up to the swing high. And so again, what I see is this level here is very prominent. I'm going to change it because it's now a low volume. So I'm going to change it to white. Not that it really matters, but I do use that a little bit for my sort of post-trading journaling. I like to know whether price was reacting to high or low volume areas. And again, significant to note, like I mentioned earlier, that line originally was a high volume node from that whole that whole rotation back here, and then it became basically a low volume ledge where the volume very significantly dropped off. It's our gap fill level. And then just marking the HVN right there. And then I want to mark, see how steep the volume drops off here. And if we zoom in, let me make this bigger so you guys can see. I'm so used to looking at it small, but I know it's probably harder for you guys to see. If we zoom in, so steep drop off in volume, and you can see it was sort of this support and then, or resistance and then support area. So I'm going to make another line there. And again, I use the correlation of volume and price action. So based on the price action, there's sort of like, where exactly could we put that line? And sometimes based on volume, it's confusing where to put the line. But I kind of look for a best fit between those two factors. And that's what works really well for me. I've got my low volume node marked off here, basically at the low. So I want to be aware of that. I'm going to adjust this now to recent price action. And then I definitely want to be aware of this high volume that's right here. And I don't worry about getting my line like to the tick because, we don't expect, we don't even try to be that precise. And then, again, just kind of looking at price action, right? This volume sort of drops off. You've got, obviously more prominent low volume here, but that's also because it's right about where our profile ends, is this push down. So I kind of want to look at price action here and just see like, what's significant. This level here, notice how it was, resistance and then resistance, right? So that's kind of meaningful. This one here, support, it doesn't really seem to, it does align with like our low volume, like where price pushed aggressively through here. But that's a swing ago. So I do kind of like this resistance level possibly becoming support. I also kind of like this area right here. You can see this is kind of where this big cluster ended, and it lines up with this sort of support, a little bit of resistance here, definitely resistance here, but also kind of zooming in. I'll show you this in a second. Let me just get the line there. And this is sort of one of the price action setups that I talk about and I look at is we had this very nice aggressive push up out of this consolidation. And this little, red bar here represents like a little moment of consolidation right before this push up. So I like to mark those off. I like to find that big aggressive push and then sort of like what happened right before that push. And, I kind of want to mark off the top of that consolidation because those can sometimes be relevant areas where the market starts to find its support. And so, kind of looking at that from a big picture standpoint, this whole zone becomes a major area of interest for me if we do start to fall down, where I start to look for something to happen. Either I look for signs of reversal, or if we break through it, I'm going to look for opportunities to short. So that's the zone from, again, the top of this little micro consolidation here at 38.42, all the way down to the low from yesterday at 38.07. And then it's got the POC at 38.25. And a lot of times these major big reversals will happen at high volume nodes. So a lot of times I find that like shorter term pullbacks reject from low volume areas. Major trend reversals will often reject from high volume areas. And if we look at this price action right now on this 10,000 tick chart, we start to see what almost starts to look like a head and shoulders. So we have this big push up, this higher low, higher high, and then we broke structure and made a lower low, and then pulled back, pushed up. We had a nice aggressive push, but it stalled. And so if this kind of continues to stall, then that gives me a heads up that, I mean, this already gave me a heads up, right? The break of structure a little bit there, that we just want to be cautious about looking at continued longs. And we could, not necessarily that we're going to go into a major trend change. We could here. It's a I think a logical area for that to happen. But definitely warning that we could go sideways for a minute, which is kind of what we're doing right now. And so, we're in this sort of swing, this push down here. And, this overnight low is probably worth, I mean, the overnight low really is here, but this is the gap, this is the gap from Friday night to the Sunday open that we have to ultimately, or that we may ultimately fill, that we want to be looking at. So looking at the price action here, what I'm thinking, again, when I look at price action, I look for aggressive moves. So we have aggressive move up. This consolidation occurred before it at the close, lots of volume at the close. So that is a very interesting area for me to either take longs or shorts from, meaning I'll look for signs of trend reversal on the short-term time frame and then look for long opportunities, or I'll wait to break below here. I'd usually like to see on the smaller time frame that we find some support, and then we break that support, and then I look for a retest. I look for that support becoming resistance, and then that would provide a really nice short opportunity with room to run down to 38.51 easily. So that's definitely something I could be interested in. I don't say that I would necessarily hold it for like a 50-point move like that, but just to grab a chunk of that would be, you've got some wide open space there that I think can be really interesting to trade, really interesting to look at. So I'm going to have my eyes on that. Basically, we had this aggressive move down that broke structure. This candle right here, this very small sort of doji with a long wick, whatever you want to call it, is the tight consolidation before the push down. So that would be an area of interest for me that you can see we came up and retested in the pre-market at 7:30. So that would have been something I was watching had I been trading at that point. This consolidation right before that big push that created, again, this sort of gap, this wick. There's a gap between the wick before this big purple bar and the wick after the big purple bar. When I see that's a clear sign of aggression for me. So I usually look for a retest of that consolidation, and that's where I would look for short-term trade opportunities on the smaller time frame. So, again, this is kind of an aggressive push up. You could say, watch out for some support around this cluster here. We want to be aware of that. Again, this is going to be pre-market volume, so in the open, we could blow right through this easily. But this aggressive push failed to even test this high, let alone make a new high. So I don't necessarily expect this to hold. In fact, if we are going to start a downtrend, we had this high, we pushed to a lower low, we are rejecting from this consolidation right here. So if we do move down, and if the trend is going to look a little bit bearish for a minute, we would expect this low to get taken out, and that would align with our sort of theory of a gap fill. So the other option at the open is to look for any immediate opportunities to short, which we may or may not really get a clean short opportunity. I think for me, it would have had to have been here, and so I missed it already. So I kind of have to wait for the next move unless something really clear happens. But I think if we get a good short opportunity, and here might be, I don't trade right before the open, but we're kind of rejecting from this previous support as well. It could be argued that this support is becoming resistance as well. So we could take this right from here all the way down, with a stop either above 39.49 or a stop above this area here on 39.42. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. That gets me ready for the open. We've got 4 minutes for the open. I don't know if you guys are looking at anything. I haven't been on the Discord. I've been looking at my charts. But that's sort of what I'm waiting for. I'm definitely really hesitant to go long right now. I want to get above this area. If I'm going to consider a long, I want to get above 39.55 personally. And then I have to look for an opportunity from there. And otherwise, I'm kind of looking for short opportunities. I'm definitely looking for a gap fill. And then from there, look for what happens. Could it be a long? Sure. Could also be a short. We don't know. We have to wait and see how price develops in that area. If it becomes a long, then maybe we look to take out this high at that point. If we break through it and we get a short setup, I'm looking ultimately to come down and test this POC, but I would personally get out of my trades by 38.50 or so would be what I'm looking at. So that's my analysis for the morning. Always curious to hear what you guys are looking at.